What if the truth wasn't destroyed, just buried? In the heart of Santiago, Chile's capital, the scars of dictatorship still ripple beneath the surface. Streets have been repaved, buildings renamed, memorials erected. But some parts of that history were never meant to be remembered, not because they were forgotten, but because they were hidden. Under the feet of millions, beneath the metro lines and manicured plazas, lies a second Santiago, a colder one, a secret city of silence and cement, built during one of Latin America's most brutal dictatorships and designed for one purpose only: disappearance. From 1973 to 1990, under General Augusto Pinochet's rule, over 3,000 people were killed or vanished without a trace. Tens of thousands more were tortured. Chile's government has acknowledged some of these crimes: the detention centers, the blacklists, the exiles. But there's one part they never addressed in full: the underground. Because Santiago didn't just imprison people above ground. It built places below, beyond the reach of journalists, lawyers, or families. And some of those places were never dismantled, only sealed. It started with Villa Grimaldi, a colonial-style house in the foothills of Santiago. Villa Grimaldi became one of the most feared detention centers under Pinochet. Survivors describe being dragged down stone staircases into soundproof rooms, narrow corridors, and pitch-black cells. But here's what most don't know. Beneath the surface, there were levels, sub-levels, a system of confined spaces and blind rooms where screams could echo for hours and never reach the air above. When Villa Grimaldi was turned into a peace park after the dictatorship, parts of the underground were filled with gravel and sealed with cement. The official reason: structural instability. But engineers later found that some chambers extended farther than originally mapped and ended at walls that didn't match the architectural plans. Walls that seemed added later. Who built them? No one knows, or no one will say. But Villa Grimaldi is only the beginning. In 1998, during a subway expansion near Estación Central, workers broke into what they thought was a disused maintenance corridor. Instead, they found a stairwell leading downward into a narrow passage filled with decaying furniture, rusted restraints, and waterlogged documents dated 1976. The site was quickly shut down by military police. The documents were never released. The stairwell was bricked up. The incident never made the national news, but the photos leaked. Dark tiles, iron doors, a cot in the center of a room too small to turn around in. One of the blueprints from the construction site marked the area with a simple code, S13. Later, a whistleblower from the Ministry of Public Works claimed that the S-zones were part of a classified subterranean logistics plan, coordinated by the DINA, Pinochet Secret Police. According to him, the purpose was twofold: detain high-risk prisoners in sites invisible to international observers, and maintain covert mobility for military intelligence through tunnel systems below the capital. The plan had a name: Proyecto Subsuelo, and it went far beyond the prison walls. In the 2000s, former DNO officer Manuel Contreras, shortly before his imprisonment, admitted under questioning that certain detainees were transferred underground, especially those considered politically dangerous or connected to foreign governments. He didn't say where they were taken, just that they didn't see the sun again. By then, reports had already surfaced about a network of tunnels stretching from the Escuela Militar, the military academy, to buildings like La Moneda Palace and the former Ministry of Defense. Some say these tunnels were for evacuation. Others say they were used to move prisoners discreetly from site to site, avoiding public detection. No official map exists. But satellite thermal scans from the Universidad de Chile in 2016 revealed anomalies beneath those exact locations. Long, linear heat signatures inconsistent with geology or sewer infrastructure. The report was never published. The lead researcher left the country months later. One of the last confirmed mentions of this system came from a survivor named Daniela Araya. Detained at just 19 years old, she later described being held in a room with no windows, no airflow, and walls that sweated with moisture. She heard trains, but not close, distant, as if she were far below them. When she was finally released, blindfolded, she was driven for over 40 minutes before surfacing in a part of the city she didn't recognize. Years later, when maps were shown to her, she pointed to an unmarked zone beneath the San Joaquin district. That zone had been leveled. A mall was built over it. No records, no arrests, no recognition. Not all tunnels are meant for escape. Some are built for disappearance. In the aftermath of Pinochet's regime, Chile struggled to process the depth of its trauma. Truth commissions were established. Archives were opened. Families received compensation. But every year, names are added to the list of the desaparecidos, those who vanished without a trace. And with every name comes a question: where were they taken? For some, the answer lies not in the Andes or the Atacama, but under their feet. In 2003, a private developer renovating an old post office near Santiago S. Ñuñoa district uncovered a sealed trapdoor beneath a false wall. It wasn't part of the building plans. Beneath it, a ladder led down into a room with no windows and no doors leading out. The floor was tiled in black and red. There were 3 iron rings bolted to the concrete, and nothing else. No paperwork was filed. The trapdoor was recovered. The developer was told not to speak. He didn't. But someone who worked on that crew sent a photograph to a local newspaper. The image was never printed, but a copy ended up in the hands of investigative journalist Carla Urrutia. For 5 years, she chased the story. She collected blueprints, spoke to ex-detainees, bribed low-level bureaucrats. What she found was a repeating pattern. Government buildings from the 1970s and 80s that had internal architectural inconsistencies, missing square meters, unexplained staircases that didn't lead anywhere, utility bills that didn't match reported usage. In 2008, she published her findings in a series titled Subsuelo, the Second Santiago. It documented 11 buildings with underground anomalies. Only 3 of those had ever been investigated by post-dictatorship truth commissions. The rest had either been sold to private companies or demolished during urban renewal projects. One, in particular, stood out: a former logistics hub used by the army in the Lo Espejo neighborhood. Officially, it had 2 sublevels. But Carla found a military requisition form from 1981 requesting materials for a 3rd, steel doors, acoustic insulation, and an air filtration unit for subterranean confinement. The form was signed, approved, then buried in a batch of unrelated procurement paperwork. She brought it to the press. The next day, her website was taken offline by a DDoS attack. She never published another investigation again. Still, parts of her work survive. An archived map shows corridors branching from the logistics center toward the old airfield. Corridors no one has confirmed, but which line up perfectly with unexplained underground noise complaints logged in the area during the 1990s. At the time, residents said they heard metallic echoes at night, as if someone were walking beneath their homes. Officials blamed it on pipe expansion. No repairs were ever done. In the same zone, urban explorers have reported strange encounters. Unmarked access panels in storm drains, unexpected concrete barriers deep in maintenance tunnels, air shafts that carry voices from somewhere deeper. In 2011, a man using ground-penetrating radar in the San Miguel district, hoping to trace colonial foundations, instead detected a rectangular cavity 6 meters below an old factory. He called municipal authorities. The area was cordoned off within hours. A week later, the factory caught fire. Cause unknown. Coincidence? Maybe. But then there are the whispers. Retired police officers, former drivers for the DNR, Paramedics now in their 80s. They talk when they think no one's listening. They speak of long nights, blindfolded detainees, orders not to ask questions. They mention doors that only opened one way. They describe being told to park in alleys and wait, engines off, until someone emerged, not from a building but from the ground. Most say they don't remember the locations. Others refuse to speak at all. The truth is this: Santiago was retrofitted during the dictatorship. Not just militarized, subterraneanized. The same way a fortress might be built with hidden tunnels, escape routes, secret vaults, so was this city. Only instead of storing treasure, it stored people. And when it was finished using them, it erased their presence, sealed the entrances, and paved over the evidence. So much of what happened under Pinochet was never meant to be proven. That was the point. Intimidation through invisibility, power through absence. If no one ever found the room, did the screams even happen? But rooms leave marks. Concrete settles, metal corrodes, foundations shift. And when they do, the silence breaks. Because the real question is not, are there tunnels beneath Santiago? It's, how many are still occupied? Every dictatorship leaves ruins. Statues fall, files burn, generals die. But underground, the past doesn't decompose. It lingers in concrete, in rust, in sealed doors behind basements that haven't been opened in 40 years. And Santiago is full of those doors. In 2017, a small earthquake struck the southern edge of the city. No major damage, no casualties. But in the hours that followed, something strange happened. The basement floor of an old municipal records building collapsed. What they found below was not part of any city schematic. A corridor, narrow, reinforced with steel ribs. Its walls were lined with peeling Soviet-style tiles. At the end, a room partially caved in. On one wall, scratched into the concrete, a date, 5/11/77, and 4 initials. The discovery never made it to public television. The site was quietly filled. The records building was condemned and later sold. But a junior architect who worked the site took photos. He anonymously shared them with Chile's Human Rights Museum. The museum never commented. The photos were never released, but one leaked. It showed a rusted metal chair bolted to the floor, 2 hooks above, dried stains below. In the back corner, a narrow pipe, too small for air, too large for water. What was this room? A cell? An execution chamber? A space for something we don't want to name? Whatever it wasn't an isolated case, because now the pattern is unavoidable. Multiple schools in Santiago built between 1975 and 1985, especially those funded through emergency educational funds from the regime, include architectural irregularities, crawl spaces that extend too deep, utility tunnels wider than necessary, sub-basements that show signs of retrofitting, but no documentation to match. In one school in the San Bernardo district, students in 2019 reported hearing mechanical humming beneath the gymnasium. The school dismissed it as faulty plumbing, until a janitor opened a hatch behind the bleachers and found a second welded hatch beneath that. He was suspended for entering a restricted space. What kind of space is restricted in a public school? A whistleblower from the Ministry of Education later confirmed that many regime-era institutions were multi-purpose structures designed with civil defense in mind, code for shelters, storage, and detention. But in Chile's context, civil defense was often a euphemism for containment. There's also the case of the former Hospital Militar, now repurposed, but once the heart of medical operations for the armed forces. Former nurses have testified that certain wings of the basement were off-limits, even to medical personnel. Supplies would vanish. Guards were posted, not during the day, but at night. One nurse said she once saw a man in civilian clothing, bleeding, being taken into the lower level, and never returned. She asked. They told her it was classified. She never asked again. These stories compound. They aren't accidents, they aren't random. They are echoes of an architecture designed for control and silence, but silence fractures. In 2020, a group of urban explorers calling themselves Los del Subsuelo published a partial 3D scan of a tunnel beneath the Estación San Diego. They accessed it by illegally entering an old storm drain. The footage showed a downward-sloping hallway with iron beams and marked concrete panels. The most striking part, a branching chamber with what looked like a service elevator shaft, sealed at both ends. Above it, written in faded paint, Zona Negra, Black Zone. No official designation uses that term, but human rights investigators say the term has appeared before, in declassified DNA files referencing unregistered transport zones outside normal jurisdiction. In other words, places not even the agency itself could fully explain. And those places are still there, still locked, still humming. Because if the dictatorship truly ended in 1990, why are there still places in Santiago you were not allowed to go? Why are there unregistered cavities listed in urban development memos? Why do blueprints from the 1980s contain structural elements that don't lead anywhere, but still show signs of use? The answer may be the most chilling of all. It never ended beneath the surface. Because concrete doesn't care who's in power. And if you build something deep enough, secret enough, and terrifying enough, no regime has the courage to reopen it. Every country has its ghosts. In Chile, they walk in silence. They live in case numbers, old testimonies, photographs held against faded walls. But some don't walk at all. Some were taken underground and never brought back. We've followed the evidence. We've shown the trapdoors, the sealed corridors, the whispers from basements and sublevels. We've connected the missing blueprints to the concrete scars that still run beneath Santiago. But one question remains. Why hasn't this come to light? Because in Chile, as in many places with a violent past, forgetting was not an accident. It was a policy. After the transition to democracy, Chile's new leadership faced an impossible choice: pursue every crime of the dictatorship, or maintain a fragile peace with the institutions that remained in place: the military, the courts, the bureaucracy. Many of the men who had built, managed, and hidden these subterranean structures were still alive, still influential. So the silence continued. In 1991, the Rettig report documented cases of forced disappearance and torture, but only those that could be verified with hard evidence. Rooms without records were excluded. Tunnels that no one dared open, ignored. The narrative was narrowed, history sanitized. Even today, attempts to investigate these spaces are met with institutional resistance. Permits are denied, access revoked, funding withheld, and yet the stories continue, like the one that surfaced in 2022 from a construction worker tasked with demolishing an old Ministry of Interior storage facility in Santiago's downtown. As they began digging the foundation, his team uncovered a descending staircase behind a sealed panel in the sub-basement. It wasn't on the plans. The steps were narrow, steep, and coated in soot. He went down alone. 10 minutes later, he came back up, silent, pale. He quit that day, never explained why. His supervisor sealed the entrance. Cement was poured. The building now houses a bank. Another story from an elderly former military mechanic claimed that during his conscription in 1980, he delivered generator parts to a cold room beneath the Escuela de Inteligencia Militar. He never saw detainees, but the hallway to the delivery site had no doors, no signs, and a guard who walked him out backwards, so he wouldn't know the way back in. He said he still dreams of the humming, the kind that shakes your bones. But even more disturbing is what has happened in recent years. During renovations of metro lines, Multiple reports have surfaced from workers who encountered blocked tunnels, reinforced with rebar and steel plates, walls newer than the tunnels themselves. In at least 3 cases, they were told to reroute rather than break through. When asked why, no answer was given, just instructions from above. And now, a disturbing possibility has emerged that not all of these sites were abandoned, not all of these cells are empty, because there's something strange about a city that expands away from its core, something deliberate about avoiding the excavation of its own foundations. Urban growth in Santiago has exploded outward, horizontally, while much of the center remains untouched, unexplored. What are they afraid of digging up? A former transit planner under condition of anonymity stated in an interview, "There are zones under the city that are marked red on every development map. Red doesn't mean dangerous, it means classified. If you build near them, you'll be stopped. If you ask, you'll be redirected. I once joked to my superior, 'Is there a dragon down there?' He didn't laugh, he just said, 'Worse.' We're left with fragments, whispers in mechanical rooms, heat readings that don't match the earth, screws rusted in walls where no furniture stands, hooks bolted to ceilings that never held lights, silence that seems too perfect, and the biggest question of all, what else was buried? Not to be forgotten, but to be protected. Was it evidence, machinery, names, or something far worse, the very infrastructure of fear, a system designed to function even when the world above believed it was free? Because that's the horror no one wants to face. That beneath Santiago's sidewalks, beneath your footsteps and your families and your freedom, there may still be doors that no one dares to open, doors behind which the past never ended, doors that were sealed, not with the end of a regime, but with the knowledge that some things should never come back into the light. But we ask again, if they built it to last forever, what happens if it still works?